Good evening. I'm Mahealani Richardson of Hawaii News Now. For the first time in 8 years, the residents of Honolulu County will choose a new mayor. The candidate field is wide, ranging from lifelong politicians to executives running for office for the first time. It's a big job and a big decision for Oahu. That's why we invited our partners at the Honolulu Civil Beat to join us for a series of revealing interviews with the leading candidates. Tonight, we present the job interview. MUFI HANNEMANN knows Honolulu Hale. He was elected to 2 terms as the city's mayor and is most remembered for starting the rail transit project. He left the office 2 years early to launch an unsuccessful run for governor. 2 years later, he ran for Congress, and 2 years after that, he ran again for governor. In his longest break from politics, he was named president and CEO of the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association. Now he says he's ready to finish the city's top job that he started all those years ago. Why should voters trust you to lead Oahu out of this pandemic crisis?
Why? I've been a mayor. With all due respect to my very worthy contenders for this position, if you're a legislator, you specialize in making laws. You don't execute, you don't implement, you don't release funds for major projects. My other worthy competitors who come from a small business background, from the nonprofit world, from the community. They have no idea what it takes to run a city with 10,000 employees, multi-billion-dollar operating budget, 18 city departments across the day, because they've never held office at the city level, no experience. So as I'm saying, this is no time for on-the-job training. You need someone that can hit the ground running.
During your previous time as mayor, your administration's stance on homelessness was that it was really the state's job, and homelessness increased on the island during your tenure. Do you acknowledge today that homelessness is part of the mayor's job description?
Here's what it is. There's a very different environment today. The county and the state are working together on resolving homelessness. That wasn't the case during my time, unfortunately. We had to focus on cleaning up Ala Moana Park, parks all the way to the Waianae coast. I felt at that time, because we didn't have a Department of Housing, let's partner with the state.
But in the absence of state leadership, isn't it the mayor's job to step up and offer housing vouchers or build public housing?
Let me set the context again for you, okay? At that time, that was what I was trying to get the state to do. There was resistance. So we did a great job of cleaning the parks, but we weren't able to meet the task of being able to relocate them to housing. This time around, as I said, it's very, very different.
You mentioned clearing out Ala Moana Park, which happened in 2006. 200 homeless people, including children, were displaced without a place to go. And homeless sweeps are now a daily occurrence under Mayor Kirk Caldwell's administration. Is that something that you would continue, that practice of sweeps?
Let me slightly correct, because you weren't here during that time. We actually gave them a place to go. Okay, wait, hang on. No, hang on. Slow your roll. Okay, we actually gave them a place to go when we took them out of Ala Moana Park. There's a park area there next to the Honolulu Police Department. We provided them a place to go. They did not want to go.
MUFI, I wanted to know, there are people, even those who have lost their jobs, but they are enjoying Waikiki without the tourists, and they know that tourism has to come back. But what do you say to those people who have really enjoyed this break that Hawaii has had?
I say to them, we have an opportunity now to rebrand Hawaii. I want a resilient tourism. I want a sustainable tourism industry. I've always been big about community-based engagement. And I think they need to be a part of how we rebrand Hawaii to make sure that whatever we have in Waikiki or in other resort areas is not exclusively for visitors. We want quality travelers here, not quantity. And I'm going to look to do more of the Hanauma Bay type of legislation I did as a council member in my mid-90s, when the current mayor then wanted to charge a fee for Hanauma Bay, but he wanted to put it into the general fund. I said nada, and I led the council's resistance to that to say, yes, it's okay to have an impact fee, but make sure it goes back to a special fund that will be back for that bay, not only for visitors to enjoy, but for residents.
What can you do as mayor to create jobs for the people who won't be able to go back to tourism?
Well, let me put it this way. I want to save jobs. And the sooner that we can reopen, the more that I can work with business owners, not just hotel owners, small business owners, to get them back on their feet. So if there's ways for us in the city to help that, I believe we can.
There seems to be a consensus out there, including rail critics and supporters and some auditors, that in your ambition to be governor back when rail was just getting underway, you misled the people about its purpose, you understated the cost, you issued contracts prematurely, and ultimately caused a lot of waste and overruns. That's what they say. How do you answer that?
Absolutely, look at the facts. Before we issued that first contract, there were 3 sets of approvals. Number 1, the Federal Procurement Code had to be adhered to, checked. Federal Transit Administration also had to give it an okay, checked. At the city and state level, we had to make sure we were in the procurement code. So a former governor actually issued a lawsuit, a protest with the Department, Attorney General's Department at that time to review the contract as it was given out. The Attorney General's office turned it over to the State Procurement Office, and they dismissed all the charges. You can look it up. That release was done in August of 2010. So we did proceed legally. The cost did get out of control because of the numerous delays. So once again, I state, when I was there, we were on time, on budget, on schedule, with all federal and state requirements to proceed. Now, the cost went from $5 billion when I left to $9 billion. I was not there.
Let me just say though, that, I mean, you are in very many ways the face of the rail project, and it's one of the most—
Really, this face here?
I'm afraid so. I think that's just a fact of the matter. But are you sitting here today and saying that you accept no responsibility for the condition of the project today?
No, not, Daryl, you missed my point. I'm saying people will always question, there's always things that have been done better, what have you, but I want to be clear. People voted for this in 2008. 53% of the people voted for rail. They said yes. I felt an obligation to get it to a good point before I did the transfer or the handoff to the next administration. So there's been problems. I don't think we need to go into why those problems happen. All I'm saying is this is where it is at $9 billion. My job is to go and fix it, complete it, because it will bring tremendous benefits. Look at Aloha Stadium now. There'd be no talk of a new stadium were it not for rail.
What would you say is your biggest regret from your previous time as mayor?
Maybe I should have stayed and finished the job as mayor. I get it. I get it from those who say, if you hadn't gone, I'd be riding the rail by now. If you hadn't gone, the rail would be in better shape. If you hadn't gone, we'd be able to make progress in homelessness and so forth, because you know how to bring the private sector in. I get it, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. But I thought at that time I was making the right decision to take those executive skills that I had basically mastered at the county level to the state level. The people said, no way, I get it.
MUFI, you've been a public figure for a long time. When was the last time you changed your mind about something important?
I think my position on the importance of making sure that people feel that their voices count. You know, I'm a big guy. I can come across very strong and intimidating, because it's not often that you find a 6'7" person who's in politics in our community. And so I've tried to adapt the way I speak, the way that they know that I'm truly listening. And because I'm prone to make decisive decisions, I think I want to do a better job of making sure that their voices were heard.
MUFI, can you describe one of the most difficult periods of your life, and how did you lift yourself out of it?
It was the death of my mom and dad. I still feel that today. I lost my mom when I was 18 years old. I lost my dad when I was 46. And everything that I am, everything that I hope to be, is due to my parents. I struggle with that every day, especially on memorable occasions like Father's Day, and going to my father's grave in Laie, and knowing that my mom is not buried here. It makes me feel that I have a mission in life to follow what they taught me, and that is to train up your child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. So that's the biggest challenge that I have.
Keith AMEMIYA is running for Honolulu mayor after working as a nonprofit executive and lawyer for 3 decades. His most visible role was 12 years as executive director of the Hawaii High School Athletic Association. He later moved on to become an executive administrator to the University of Hawaii Board of Regents and served as senior vice president of Island Holdings. He has no experience in politics, but says that's exactly why he's the right person for the job. What makes you the leader that voters should trust to lead Oahu out of this pandemic crisis?
Well, I'm running for mayor because we need change. We need new leadership. We need a fresh perspective. We need to restore trust in government. Everywhere I go, people say that we need change, and I care deeply about the community, and I want to create a better Hawaii and a better Oahu for all of us.
Did you have 1 or 2 big ideas, that voters should connect with your candidacy?
Well, one issue I want to undertake and start from day one is to increase the affordable housing inventory in Hawaii. We're currently 22,000 units short on Oahu. That's a huge amount. That is a big reason we have a high cost of living. High cost of living is the #1 concern I hear from working class families across Oahu. And I was the first, and I'm the only candidate to have a Housing for All plan. It's a comprehensive plan that seeks to aggressively reduce the housing vacancy or housing inventory, the shortage that we have right now.
Where did you get experience to deal with these issues? Because from what I see, you've been a director of a nonprofit, and you work at an insurance company, but you've got no direct experience in government, no direct experience in a for-profit business. So are you even qualified to be mayor, and can you do these things you're trying to do if you haven't had any experience in this area?
I view my lack of direct experience in politics as a plus. Too many of our candidates, too many of our politicians have been entrenched. They tout the wrong kind of experience. Their experience in being involved in politics their whole career, their experience in running for different offices every election cycle, their experience in leaving their office to run for another office during the term that they're sitting in office.
But Keith, nobody puts no experience on their resume.
Right. Well, I have a lot of broad-based experience, especially for the job of mayor. I've been an executive in several areas, in the private sector, the public sector, the nonprofit sector. I've led large statewide organizations. I've led organizations that had many challenges that are similar to running city government.
Keith, in your latest television commercial, you talk about your family, and you also remind viewers that you're a Democrat. Why did you do that when the office of mayor is nonpartisan?
I felt it was important to take a stand to show what party I belong to. Yes, it's a nonpartisan race, but almost everybody I come across asks me what party I belong to. I'm not afraid to say I'm a Democrat, and I stand for the democratic ideals. Now, of course, I'm willing to work with everyone, whether they be Republican, Independent, Aloha Aina Party, or whatever other party that's out there. And as mayor, I will work with everyone. I'm not just going to work with Democrats because I'm a Democrat, but I do believe and stand by democratic ideals.
But you showed your cards there. I mean, remember, 1/3 of the people in this state actually voted for President Trump. Hillary Clinton got the other 2/3, but you basically told 1/3 of the voters out there, Republican, who did not vote Democrat, these are the guys I'm going with. Because, by the way, David Ige and Scott Saiki and Ron Kochi and all the members of the delegation in Congress are Democrats too.
Well, again, I stand by my party affiliation, but I want to assure everyone I'll work across the aisle, I'll work with everyone, but my foundation is Democratic Party based.
Are you the candidate that's going to end homelessness on Oahu once and for all?
That's my goal, that's my intent.
The so-called sweeping of homeless encampments has been a pretty controversial element of Mayor Caldwell's response to unsheltered homelessness. Would you continue that practice?
Let me say this. When I see homeless on the sidewalk, I feel sad. I wonder what got them to that point. I think of my own mom who has mental illness and was on the brink of homelessness many times, if not for her family and friends. But on the other hand, I also think of a mom and her child on a stroller walking along a sidewalk and being afraid or having to navigate around a homeless person. Both situations are not good. It's not good to have a homeless person living on the sidewalk, but the solution to that is more affordable housing, more housing, mental health treatment, more drug abuse treatment.
Those things do take time though. So in the meantime, would you continue sweeps?
We need to find more alternative housing options for homeless people. There are shelter beds available. We need to get the homeless people to those shelter beds.
One of the things about working class people we hear with the hotel workers, for example, one job should be enough and calling for better wages. Would you impose a minimum wage of, say, $20 an hour for across the board or for the hospitality industry or something like that?
Well, it's clear that the higher the wage for hotel workers and the like, the better their quality of life. They're more productive, they're healthier, they have more time for their families. So anytime you can raise the wage, I'm in favor of it. Now, of course, we have to balance it with the needs and the capability of the employer. And especially with COVID hitting us, we need to look at what's fair. It wouldn't make sense to force a $20 an hour minimum wage when companies will shut down because they can't afford to pay their workers. But I do favor a serious look at increasing wages for our frontline workers.
So the rail project right now, it's at a major step. They're trying to find a contract with a group of companies that will not only build the last stage of the rail, but also will maintain it and run it for the next 30 years at a price that is affordable to the city. Sounds a little bit like unicorns and rainbows to me, but what happens if that doesn't work? What's your plan B for the rail system?
Well, plan A is what I hope happens, that we have a viable option that works out for the city. But if not, we're going to have to look at making changes, whether it's alterations to the rail station or the like. We need to sharpen our pencil. We need to look at maybe elongating the financing of the rail project. But we need to finish the rail project. Like it or not, it's almost finished. We've gone too far. Yes, I'm frustrated like everyone else at the rail progress thus far. It's been disastrous. From before construction, it was rushed, it was ill-planned, and it's been a source of frustration for everyone.
Let me ask though, other candidates in the race have been making a lot of accusations about fraud, corruption, contractor, even theft from the system. Do you think that it was incompetence or criminality that got us where we are?
Well, it was clearly incompetence. Now, criminality, I don't know. I'm not willing to say that. I know there's a federal investigation ongoing, and let's see where it takes us.
What's one of the more difficult periods of your life, and how did you lift yourself out of it?
One of the more difficult parts was during my high school years. My family was having some problems, and I was taken in by my best friend's family. So prior to that, I was getting shuttled from relative to relative, and I was very close to the Kobayashi family. Their oldest son, Chris, was my best friend. I used to spend weekends with them often, and one day they asked me, or told me, like, hey, why don't you live with us? They provided a lifeline to me. They provided love, compassion. They provided structure to me. They proved to me that all it takes is one family or one person or set of people to show they care, and it can uplift you and change your life trajectory. I'm very indebted to them for helping me. They didn't have to. We weren't blood relatives. They treated me like one of their own children. They had 4 children of their own, and I was, a 5th child, so to speak, to them. And I learned a lot about giving back, compassion, selflessness, and just doing good when you don't expect anything in return.
Kim Pine has been on the political scene in Hawaii since 2004 when she was first elected as a state representative. Affiliated at the time with the Republican Party, she served as minority floor leader for 2 years before running for a nonpartisan role on the Honolulu City Council. Now in her second term on the council, she chairs the Committee on Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. It's all those years in Hawaii politics that she says give her what it takes to lead the city. Why should voters trust you to lead Oahu out of this pandemic crisis?
Because I'm the only one that's been on the job right now, helping them to get out of the pandemic crisis. No other candidate has been on the ground in government, seeing what we can and cannot do, what we need to do in the future. I've been studying this very complicated city system for 7.5 years, and I can tell you it's nothing like the state legislature. It is a very different form of government. Just understanding the complexities of each department has taken many years for me to do. No one else can say that they can start on day one, except for maybe one other candidate, but he was mayor and he quit, so I don't think he really wants to do the job anyway. So.
In your campaign material, you basically are accusing the system, the rail system, of having lost many millions, billions of dollars to fraud and to kickbacks. I'm looking for the words exactly because I don't want to misquote you, but you basically are saying there's many crimes committed and associated with the rail project. So far, no one has been convicted of any crime or charged with any crime in connected with the rail project. So is it responsible for you to accuse this already troubled project of being a site of crime when that hasn't happened? Can you say who committed crimes and what were the crimes?
Well, I'm just saying what the federal government believes, that they believe that crimes have taken place and that's why they're investigating rail. I've talked to many former staffers who have been fired because they raised concerns that cost overruns were taking place that did not need to happen, that people were getting contracts that should not have gotten contracts, that there as change orders that could have been prevented. And people that are hired and paid a lot of money to prevent this kind of stuff were not stopping these types of things from happening. So when the federal government finally says, oh, we found nothing, then I will start to say, you know, I guess we didn't find anything. But it's my responsibility when I have HART staff calling me on a regular basis, telling me things, okay, to look into, and only the federal government can look into. So they're looking at all of these things. It is my responsibility, if the only thing that I can do, since I can't really oversee HART, the way that HART is built, is it is its own entity and it's going to do whatever the heck it wants based on the law. The best thing I can do as a leader is to ensure that they are as transparent and open and do the right thing with your money as much as possible.
Did I hear you say HART officials are actually calling you and saying there's stuff going on
here?
No,
staff, HART staff.
HART staff. Well,
and those staff usually get fired right after that.
Are you then calling the federal government and saying...
Whatever I have, I turn over to them.
Is there an example of something that you have that you could share with us?
You know, there's a lot of scared staffers that have left. And they would like to live in Hawaii and have another job. And if they want to talk about it, they can. But obviously they're too scared. So it's my job to be their voice. It's always been my job to be the voice of my constituents.
Who do you blame for costs getting out of control?
I think it's HART and it's the staff there. They were hired.
Is there a particular leader, though, that you hold accountable?
Let me just tell you my theory. After studying this for a very long time and talking to HART staff at lower levels that are reporting to me things going on, I believe this system is too big for a small town like us to do. The temptation to make money on the side, the temptation just to look the other way for a contract change or a change order is too great. That we should have the federal government in partnership with us and the FBI having people on the ground until we finish the project.
One way to help more people would be to do what the hotel worker union wants, and they say, well, one job should be enough. And for working people, they shouldn't have to work multiple jobs. what would you think about raising a minimum wage of, say, $20 an hour for hospitality industry workers? Is that something you'd support?
Some of them are making that much right now already. And this goes back to not being against tourism, but going back to the tourism of the 80s, where one job was enough. In the 80s, we had a higher spending tourist, we had less tourists here, less people intruding on all of our parks and beaches. We were, as residents, we're paying half for all infrastructure. Now we're paying almost double because we're not getting as much money. And the workers not only got great health benefits, they got great sick leave, and they also had great pay in comparison to with inflation today.
So how would you manage tourism, assuming we get back up to a big number of tourists? How would you manage it in a way that it was more or less intrusive on communities and on all the beaches and parks and places where we go?
Well, I passed several different bills in the council that looks at just this. And one is getting a lot of the hotels to report their energy use, their use of their people that are on the beaches and the parks, on our roads, and we become a partner together to see how we can help minimize those things. When Disney came on board in my district, I said, wait a second, you guys are going to take over the Leeward Coast, and we love our private spaces and our parks and beaches. Can you do more on your property to keep your residents on their property? And they found a way to do that, and they found that majority of their residents hardly left the property at all. So if you look at new developments, of course, we would encourage people, what can you do to keep people in your area and enjoying that space?
We've talked so much about rail, we've talked so much about tourism. All that stuff's out the door if climate change continues to raise sea level. I know about the plastic spill that you were very involved with that and so forth, but what's that really going to do to help the hotel right there in Waikiki that's going to be flooded over within just a matter of years? When you really got to look at maybe giving them some breaks on property taxes if they're going to start putting in, I don't know, a new seawall or to move back and so forth. This is a very huge deal. We've already talked about moving the rail line in further. Sylvia Lucas proposed that. You may jump in.
What about the house on Ever Beach, right next to where you live? Those houses along the ocean where the waves crash on top of the houses on a regular basis. What do you do there?
Each business and each person took a risk when they built by the ocean. It shouldn't be a person that decided to live on a hill to use their property taxes to fix those problems.
So let the ocean take them.
That's the choice that they made to live there. We've all been seeing the ocean recede, So everyone made their own choice to build close to the ocean because it's beautiful and wonderful. And some people say, you know what, Chad? It was worth it. I had a house for 15 years. Awesome. I'm gonna go move now. And so that's where I disagree, where government has to fix everything that is made by people's individual choices.
Can you describe one of the most difficult periods of your life, and how did you lift yourself out of it?
Just one? No.
We've all got many, but you can pick one.
I don't know. I think my whole life has been tough and it's been good. Just being a woman in politics is very tough. There's discrimination even today, constantly. And for me, it's either I look a certain way or I'm not respected.
Can you give us a specific example, particular story?
Well, when I was at the legislature, a particular elected official just wanted to touch my hair a lot. And so that's why I changed my hair. And a lot of things went on like that a lot. And so over time, things changed.
A lot of my students don't feel like they have a future here. They're planning to leave for the mainland. What would you tell them? Why should they stay? Why should they stay with their families here as opposed to leaving? How can they trust you to make a livable life for them in this city?
Well, as one of the youngest candidates that's running, I'm fighting for my future and my daughter's future too. And I can guarantee you if we implement a lot of the things like ensuring that we have enough affordable housing, ensuring that we have a more diverse economy, that we can feed ourselves, that they have a chance here and to not lose hope.
Rick Blangiardi is new to politics, but no stranger to Hawaii. He first made his mark as a coach for the University of Hawaii football team in the 1970s. From coaching, he went on to the world of broadcast news. He led TV stations across the country, including Telemundo. He eventually returned to the islands and led the creation of Hawaii News Now. He spent his career running broadcast TV stations, and running the city, he says, is no different than running a business. Why should voters trust you to be the leader to lead us out of this pandemic crisis?
Well, you know, my entire body of work and my whole life has been about putting other people first, starting with my family, my employees, various stakeholders. I don't perceive, you know, in my running for office as an individual experience. I mean, I have enough, I think, understanding and humility to realize that it takes a team, and been very good at selecting people, picking people, understanding decision making, and a lot of the transferable skills. So I would tell you that I think I bring a lot to this job.
Maybe the single biggest criticism is coming from COLLEEN HANNEBUSA, MUFI HANNEMANN, Kim Pine. All of them have served in office or are serving.
Yeah.
But you can't just come from the business world. You're going to need training wheels. Keith AMEMIYA, the other top candidate as well, has a business background.
Yeah.
You got to respond to that.
Sure.
They're saying you're not going to be up to the job.
I will respond to that right now, because I actually heard one of them say the other night in a forum that this isn't business, it's government. Okay? And that to me just really, like, that's exactly why I decided to do this, okay? Because somehow that's some sort of inner secret world. Look, the mayor is the CEO of the city. It is about managing people, decision making. I'm going to say it again, having the right people, understanding what it takes to get things done. This is not some inner secret club or whatever, because we're not in that place.
Why should voters trust you to run the city if you're not familiar with the city's finances?
Because it's a budget. We've worked with budgets a long time, and I will tell you honestly, I plan to surround myself with some really good people. I'll say that over and over again. You know, budgets are just a matter of zeros. I've worked with much bigger budgets than I ever had here when I came in Hawaii. That was my first thing I had to do, was recalibrate my thinking. I was in places where $50 million was a rounding error, and you know, here $50 million was the whole market. So you know, it's that. It's really what's behind the budget and the people and what we're going to have. And again, I don't know what they're going to do. I have no idea what kind of cuts they might make. All the talk that's going about right now, just on the pay raises that were negotiated months, if not years ago, and what's going to happen there, if they're going to put a moratorium on that, and what the fallout's going to be, and so on. So I bring a track record of being the guy who was always hired to replace the person who was fired and said, fix it.
Rick, if you had to say there was one big idea that you have for the city, one big idea voters could connect with your campaign, what would that be?
Well, I'm really convinced that we can do a lot more on homelessness. I think that's a really important part of our community.
Are you the candidate that's going to end homelessness once and for all?
Well, you know, ending homelessness is sort of the ideal. I'm not so sure. You know, I look at the point in time count, Christine, how they present it, and you know, we seem to stay pretty constant. That's because people are coming in and coming out. I think we could take a big bite out of the chronic homelessness, and that's going to take collaboration.
One of the things that hotels are saying is they've not been able to operate for months, and they're saying we really need a property tax break.
Yeah.
Would you not just pushing it back, but a break? Would you give that to hotels?
Well, you know, that's a big question, right? Because there's a big difference between saying they want to defer their taxes inevitably, or whether or not, as I think the mayor has done, giving them a 4-month term, right? That's a big forgiveness, because if we were to say, no, you don't pay property taxes, then I think that actually got raised and it got killed. I'm not in favor of doing that. These are big multi-international hotels that have been here. They're really working in an extractive business and have been for a long time. And while they serve Hawaii well, you know, there's a lot more I believe they could go back to do in the community. I said yesterday publicly that I would go back to the hotels and negotiate with them. I'd actually want them to make a bigger contribution.
Well, back to the housing piece for one moment. You know, we hear all the time we need to address the homelessness, we need to increase affordable housing. Politicians say this, you know, ad nauseum. But what exactly is your plan to do that? What are you going to do differently?
Okay. You know, the affordable housing, the notion of affordable housing has kind of lost, the word affordability to me has sort of lost its meaning, okay? Because if you look at what the rental incomes are and what people make, and this is why you don't have one job is enough and whatever. So Look, when I first came back to go to graduate school in '71, I lived in a little cement building, 3 steps, walk up kind of a thing. I don't know when they stopped making those. I haven't seen one of those built in a long time. We're going to just have to take a look at what we can actually build.
But
Not
do
to
you have
remove
a plan
homelessness.
to address it?
Do I have a specific plan right now on a housing plan? I think we'll develop that. I think I can tell you right now that I think that that there are developers who really want to build that way. There are incentives that could happen that way, and I think we're going to design that.
The whole rail project right now, they're counting on a consortium of companies coming together in order to build the last segment and then run it for 30 years. Do you feel confident that that's going to come through? And if it doesn't, what's plan B for you? If that P3 doesn't work, what's plan B?
Well, I'm not confident it's going to come through.
Well, but you said that it would increase property taxes to record levels, but nobody is supporting using property tax to pay for rail. I'm wondering who told you that that would happen?
Well, because how else are you going to pay for it? See, I turned around and I asked them, do you think you can get more money from the feds? We're going to get more money from the feds to do that, which is what I've heard people saying that, because else, where's it going to come? You're going to have a real depression in your GET and in your hotel room tax, which actually has a lot to do with the construction of the rail. So if you're going to say build it to Ala Moana, let's just be feasible and let's be real, okay? And I was always an advocate for building the rail to completion. COVID-19, there's a pre and a post. COVID-19 is a wake-up call. So if you're going to say we're going to build it to Ala Moana, you already know, first of all, we don't even know what the bid is going to come in at. The $1.4 billion for the last 4.1 miles is tied to P3, provided the bids. What if it's even a bigger number? How does that get paid for? And if, in fact, if they're going to pay that, okay, at what price do we have to give up the city? So my point is, you're going to have less revenue. There's been already the model to fund this thing from the general excise tax and the room tax, okay? And so if you're not going to raise property taxes, you're going to go to the feds. You're going to go to the feds and you're going to say, we need more money for a project that's billions of dollars over budget, that's years behind in the making, that's under investigation for corruption and other things. You think that's a likely source of money? So where is it going to come from under these circumstances?
You're the guy that's running for mayor. Tell us.
Well, I think, well, I'm not going to raise property taxes. So then we have a whole different mindset about where we are with rail and what we're going to do about it.
So what do you do about it?
Well, you're asking me what is the call? If we
So in that
if we
situation,
can't
how
build it,
can-
we make the call, we stop it.
If the visitor industry comes back in 3 or 4 years, those taxes will be back again. And what I'm hearing you say is maybe you'd stall until that starts happening?
That's what I said, yes.
Okay,
That's
all
what I
right,
said. That's what I meant by
understand.
stall. It's a 100-year project. We may not be able to go forward with it now. Just like the hotel worker who's going to lose their job because the hotel has got 1/5 of the attendants in there. There's nothing. If you can't pay for something, you can't pay for it.
We wanted to just shift gears a little bit. We wanted you to explain one of the most difficult periods of your life and how have you gotten yourself out of it?
Of real hardship.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was from a financial standpoint, I guess, or maybe from a career standpoint. I left coaching. I didn't want to leave coaching. It was really hard for me. I was doing really well. I was born to be a college football coach. I have every confidence. If I had stayed then, I would have been a head coach. At some point, I just was really comfortable in that, but I couldn't afford it to stay in it, and so I took a job I knew nothing about. This is how I got into a broadcast career. Friends of mine who had left coaching had said, "Don't go sell insurance; you'll hate it. Don't sell sporting goods; you'll hate it." I literally backed into a media job. I really had no game plan for it, despite the fact I already had a master's degree. I was so programmed I was going to go do that. So I changed my life's direction, and that wasn't easy. And they didn't exactly roll over and make room for me at KGMB in those days. That was a dominant television station. So it was out of that. And quite honestly, in the beginning, I even felt sorry for myself for a while. I didn't walk into it feeling really good about it. I was doing it out of duress. It's a tough chapter. I had a baby coming. So that was a turning point for me.
COLLEEN HANNEMANN is a veteran politician, holding her first elected office in 1998 as a member of the state Senate. During that time, she became the first woman to ever serve as Hawaii's Senate President. She moved to Washington next, elected for 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. She ran unsuccessfully to move over to the Senate and eventually set her sights on a run for Hawaii governor, losing in the 2018 primary. She had a short stint chairing the Heart Board and says her extensive knowledge of federal government is what the city needs now.
Why should you be the leader that voters trust to lead Oahu out of this pandemic crisis?
You know, of course, that's the decision that the voters will be making. The reason is because in this time, you cannot have somebody who's going to be learning on the job or somebody who has, as I've said, training wheels, that needs training wheels. You need someone that knows how government works. Because in this pandemic crisis, it is about government. So I feel that somebody who understands government, knows how government works, all levels of government. Now during this pandemic, there is no question that you need somebody who understands how the federal government works, how to access the various funding source, and somebody who actually understands federal laws. Because that is the entity, as we used to jokingly say, that can print money, and they are.
Yeah, you definitely have federal experience. You served in Congress twice. You were the Senate president, so that's at the state level. But what kind of municipal experience do you have? You never held a position at that level. And if you're mayor, you're dealing with things like sewers and with potholes. Are you really going to be able to start without training wheels on that job?
Oh yeah, I believe so. Because the part of all of that is going to come down to somebody who really understands how federal monies work. Because even in situations like potholes and sewage and all of that, you need somebody who understands how to get the funding in and how procurement works, and I definitely understand that. I understand also, having been chair of HART and being on there for about 15 months total, I understand how the biggest procurement, the CIP project in this whole state's history operates.
In using the Heart Board as part of your resume, I'm not really sure that that's a good idea. For the brief time you were there, did you make any substantive change in direction, or were you able to accomplish anything, or did you just get in there, see what the problems were, and run away?
No. And I think this is the thing that what people did not understand, that when I got on the Heart Board, first of all, there was a whole issue of how budgets were presented, and it really is transparency. I think that people who watched us would agree to one thing: transparency and understanding how and what HART had not done and what HART needs to do was a major accomplishment during the time that I was there. For example, I was the one who crashed the PMOC meetings, and the people didn't even know.
PMOC?
Yeah, I know, I was going to say, people don't even know that. They were in
are-
existence from the get-go. PMOC is called the Project Management Oversight Consultant or Contractor. They're part of the deal. They report to the federal government, and they produced a monthly report. The HART board members didn't get the monthly report. And then they would come in quarterly. And that's the meetings that I would crash. For example, when...
Barge in, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because they told us we didn't have a right to know, because we were the board.
Colleen, could I zoom out for a little bit and just ask you this straightforward question? What's your one big idea for the city? What's the one big idea that voters should connect to your candidacy?
I think what the voters should connect to is the fact that public confidence has never been as low as it is in the state when I returned from Congress, but definitely in the city and county of Honolulu. And that's, as you know, public corruption was at the highest levels of government, primarily law enforcement, which gives everyone a very uncomfortable feeling. And of course, people had a sense about what we're doing with rail as well. So I think what I would like people to feel is that I say, without public confidence or people believing in government again, we're not going to be able to move forward. How to accomplish that is a way of saying to people, look, in order for us to succeed, we got to work together towards a new normal, and hopefully it's a better normal. We have to redefine what the economic base is for Hawaii. And we have to say, okay, what is the role of city government? Because we have all these levels of government. What is the role of city government? I think what my greatest one thing that I want to accomplish right out of the bat is for people to believe that it's going to be different. It's not going to be same old as we've had in the past. It's going to be a different situation.
Well, Colleen, are you the same old? Because that's what some of your opponents are saying.
You know, I don't understand why people feel that I'm same old, because I think my political career has shown quite to the contrary. I think if you look at the changes that have come in government, they have come when I was there.
You mentioned restructuring the economic base. What exactly are you talking about, and how could you do that as mayor?
You know, that's a really good question, because the mayor's always viewed as somebody who can only take care of sewage and you know, landfills and things like that, and they don't do anything else. You know, when you think about it, Honolulu is the base of the state's economy. So, you know, when I decided to run for mayor, my Big Island supporters, who I thought would tell me don't do it, actually came forward and said, you should do it, because and this is pre-COVID, they said, we know we're having a difficult time, and you need to do Honolulu, because where Honolulu goes, the rest of the state goes. So what Honolulu needs to lead in is to recognize that it can do things. For example, we need to do we need to find a new economic base. However, in the meantime, Honolulu can take the lead in stabilizing what we have now.
You know, it's cited as the #1 issue of concern for residents in the National Community Survey, and the recent point-in-time count shows the numbers really haven't changed much. We still have 4,400 at least homeless people, sheltered and unsheltered. So are you the candidate that's going to end homelessness on this island once and for all?
You know, I'd like to be able to tell you, of course, I'll be the one who's going to end it, but I'm not sure that we're ever going to completely end homelessness. And the reason is because homeless is not a broad brush category where the resolution for everybody is the same. It's not. So I am the candidate, however, that understands that, it recognizes that in this time of the pandemic, we have to look at it and say, hey, this has given us another opportunity. Because, you know, those little pop tents for people who may have been exposed to the coronavirus, they have to leave their stuff outside, they come in. They're doing it voluntarily, because what are they afraid of? They're afraid that they have this coronavirus. That 14-day quarantine period, you can have them overdosed with social services, because the problem with the chronically homeless is they don't necessarily want help. But this is a situation where they want help. We have to have shelters built. That's something that we should use. We should use CARES Act money for, because I'll tell you what, the CARES Act money, which is supposed to address COVID, many people are expected to become homeless because of that. So start doing something now.
Can you describe one of the most difficult periods of your life, and how did you lift yourself out of it?
I think the most difficult periods of my life was when you lose an election, and this election was the Senate election in 2014, and it's lost by just a mere 1,700 votes, and you have people who, I've had a woman come up to me, I think she was at the country club, I was going to meet some people for dinner, and she told me, you know, I've always felt you were a fighter, so why aren't you fighting for this election? And I told her then, and I said, and this is why it was so difficult. I said, if it was just me, I would. Because, you know, that's when we found ballots on Maui, and there were all these issues about how it was, and we had the hurricane, and the different places closed that should have been open, and different ones that were open should have been closed. And I said, but it's not about you. When you run for office, it's about the people who support you.
The full interviews are posted now on all of our streaming platforms, or listen on the go by subscribing to the Hawaii News Now podcast. Mahalo for watching.